Cool. Well, hi all, and welcome to another AW interview. I am Tim Adams, multimedia producer at AW, and today I'm joined by Olympian, two-time British marathon champion, former world record holder in the women's 50 kilometres, and Aly, most recently a six-star marathon finisher. So Aly Dixon is with us. And Aly, you've got behind you on your wall the vests essentially that you've won at these marathons, and of course, Rio and Daegu at the World Champs in 2011 as well. When you look at those, how do you reflect on, the achievements that you've had in your career, but also the fact that you are now a six-star kind of finisher within the major marathons as well?
Yeah, I think kind of first off, it's still quite surreal. So as I've went through like the last 10, 11 years, I've kind of, because I've been going from one race to another, I've never really had time to sit back and reflect on exactly what it is that I've achieved. But now kind of, it's a month since Chicago, and that's given us the time to kind of finally, look at what I have achieved. And, the vests behind us, and I've got some more in front of us that do show a very, a successful career and a career beyond what I ever dreamt possible as a child. And yeah, kind of immensely proud of everything that I've achieved. Things like that world record, the World 50K Championship, it's not really things that I would have ever thought I'd put against my name. And with the world record, I almost kind of felt like I was a bit of an imposter as well. Kind of, I never saw myself as a world record standard athlete. So it was a bit hard to take. And it was a bit of a relief when Des Linden went out and beat that record. You're not living up to that hype anymore of a world record holder. But yeah, kind of, all of the achievements that I've had, the marathons that I've done, they are, brilliant memories and something I'll be forever proud of.
I was about to say, you haven't just made an impact in terms of one specific, discipline. It's been over many kind of variations. And just quickly on that women's 50 kilometers, when you did that in Romania, and then obviously Des breaks that, but she doesn't just break it, she goes under 3 hours in doing so when she actually breaks it. What were your thoughts on Des's race? The effort that she had, and obviously the impact that it's had for kind of American marathon runners and kind of long distance runners as well.
Yeah, I was really supportive of her attempt to break it, and I knew, barring any illness or accident on the day, that she should take a big chunk out of it. Kind of at our best, she's a 2:22 marathon runner, I'm a 2:29. So, she should have been that 7 minutes, which she ended up being, in front of us over the 50K. But it was really nice of her to acknowledge kind of me. And, she put a video out of her breaking that not long ago. And the last screen of that video actually said, "Thanks to Aly Dixon for setting the boundaries of world endurance running." So it was lovely of her to acknowledge that. And since then, we've had a Kenyan try to beat Des's record. She missed out by about 20 seconds or so. So it is good that, I've kind of brought the 50K to life a little bit. I think some people have looked at me running that in Romania and gone, well, these records and championships are within reach of us, and we're never going to break marathon world records. That's pretty much out of reach for 99.9% of the world. But the 50K, it is, there's even some British girls could still go and run faster than Des's time just now. And yeah, it is nice to be a milestone in those progression of the records.
I was about to say, do you feel, and we'll get on to the likes of Eilish and Charlotte, and of course, even Shalane Flanagan recently, but do you feel kind of with, especially, Charlotte and Eilish for what they've achieved, do you feel the baton in, especially in British running, has moved on quite considerably? I know obviously Paula, people say Paula was ahead of her time. The fact that Paula's so far ahead of everyone else in terms of even some of the records now, especially in the marathon, but do you feel there's the potential that even Paula's 2:15 could potentially get beaten in the marathon?
I think it would take something very special to beat Paula's 2:15, especially by a Brit. I think Eilish is going to do fantastic when she moves up. Charlotte's done really well for, when she did her debut in 2016, as is, one day you're going to run 2:25, and she just went way beyond that already. But yeah, kind of, if you look back when Paula was running those 2:15s and 2:17s, the girls that are now running were kind of teenagers, and they were taking Paula as the inspiration and looking at her and saying, well, we've got a British girl out there in front, winning these marathons, setting world records. And then she's kind of been the one that's now kind of fueled the fire for the current generation. So we have all, we're kind of, pushed each other on, and I think I'm leaving the sport at a very good time, because the times are coming down like crazy. And, even at my best, I think on a good day, I probably could have done a 2:27 or 2:28. But now, those times aren't going to get you anywhere. Even making British teams, you're going to be needing to run at least 2:27 now. So it has moved on a lot. Part of that's with the shoe technology, and part of that is just that we've got a really good crop of girls, and they're looking at, Steph Twell, Jess Coulson, Charlotte Purdue, they're all running these kind of 2:22, 2:24s, 2:25s. And they're saying, well, if they can do it, we can do it. And they're using that as kind of the inspiration to push on themselves. And then, people like Steph Davies, a massive jump through to the 2:27, and we have a big group now that's just waiting around that 2:29, 2:30 to also make that jump up. So I think we are in a very, very strong position, probably the strongest we've ever had in British marathon running. And then obviously everybody's waiting for Eilish to come out and do her stuff as well. So she's got a lot of pressure on her shoulders.
I was about to say, do you feel Charlotte, obviously, that 2:23 in London, do you feel that she's the first almost out of that group to get towards that stage? And you just feel that that's going to be the case for so many other, British athletes in marathon running?
Yeah, I think just over the last kind of 2 or 3 years, you've always had one athlete that'll go out and run, a 2:26, and then that'll push somebody onto a 2:25, and it's came down. And we've got Charlotte now running like a 2:23, and I think she's still got more to come. And yeah, all the others are now kind of, pushing on, because everybody wants to be that top Brit. So, we just are kind of pushing. And like I say, once you see one Brit do it then gives you the belief that you can do it. So there is kind of that just constantly pushing each other and pushing each other. And I think eventually we will have a good, handful of runners in amongst that kind of very top world class of like the 2:22s, 2:24s. And yeah, we might get one or two breaking into the, low 2:20s. I think a sub 2:20 would be very special. And yeah, kind of beating Paula's British record, I think that would just be exceptional. But never say never. There's always somebody who can come out and do something special on the day.
I was about to ask, what do you think's possible, kind of realistic in the next, let's say, 2 or 3 years? Do you think sub 2:20 is achievable based on the right course?
Yeah, for some of the athletes, I'm not going to pin names to times or anything, but I think for some of the athletes that we've got out there, and some that are kind of, going to make the moves in the next few years, I do think we can get some 2:20s. We've got like Sarah Hall over in America who's shown that you can get down to those low 2:20s. Molly Siddell, although she hasn't, run a super fast in world times, she's progressing all the time. And again, that's kind of showing our girls that, this is what it takes, and we've got what it takes as well. And we've just got to, stick with what we're doing, and yeah, just get everything right on the day, and good conditions, good course, good pace making. And I do believe that they can be up there and challenging.
I've got to ask then, what did you make of Charlotte's 2:23, and what was your kind of initial reaction to that? Because she was so close to Mara's, time, and she was so close to them, just being behind Paula, on the UK all-time rankings.
Yeah. I actually missed London Marathon completely because I was working. I was the lead bike at the Kielder Half Marathon that day.
Oh, right, okay.
I was in the middle of a forest getting soaking wet. And yeah, I managed to get back to the accommodation and quickly flick on the TV, and the results were coming through. And yeah, like I said earlier, I always thought Charlotte would run a good marathon, but when I saw that time flash up, I was like, wow, she smashed this one out the park. And although she said she wasn't really going out to prove a point, she had that fire in her belly to prove to those selectors that they made the wrong choice. And yeah, it was, probably faster than I ever imagined her going, but she's shown over the half marathon and attitude towards training and racing that, she is more than capable of these times. And I still do think that she can go faster. A bit more company. She ran the final part a lot solo. So if that was in a mixed race, a Berlin or something like that, or a Valencia, I do think that she could have got Mara's time and went second on the all-time list. So I'm sure she'll have her own thoughts on that. And, as runners, it doesn't matter how much of a PB you run, you always think you can go faster.
Yeah.
So I'm sure she'll have her sights set on a faster time and be planning that already.
It's pretty exciting because there's kind of the known knowns, but then there's kind of the known unknowns. And I guess the known unknown is what can Ailish do in a marathon?
Yeah.
I guess the obvious question is, what do you think is achievable for her, given she's done, finished second at the Great North Run, third half marathon time between her mum and Paula, and then obviously she won the Great Manchester Run, she won the Great South Run, but the marathon, it could be pretty spectacular.
Yeah, I mean, I do think she's going to run really fast, but I think one thing that we need to remember as well is kind of a fast half marathon like she's run doesn't guarantee marathon success. And I think kind of, just for Eilish's own kind of security sort of thing, a lot of people need to remember that just now until she goes out and runs a marathon and we see what she does on her first one. We shouldn't really be heaping the pressure on her, saying, oh, she's going to run so fantastically fast and sub 220 and whatever. I do think she probably has that potential, but kind of, I think we just need to be a little bit careful with what the pressures that we are putting on her. But the great thing that I like about Eilish, and I think I know her well enough to be able to say this, she's quite naive about her own talent and how good she is. I remember after the Great North Run, when I spoke to her, I says, what time do you get? She was like, I think it's a good time. I was like, seriously?
That's Ailish.
Yeah,
That's Ailish.
She's just like, she's obviously very clued up on athletics, but she's just very naive on what she's actually capable of and what her potential is. In a private environment with her and Michael, they might be a bit more confident and a bit more kind of ambitious with these times, but she just likes to keep herself to herself, and she takes everything in her stride. But yeah, I do think she does have the potential to go very fast. Like I say, a very low 220, to go sub 220 would be absolutely great. I think there's, I'd prefer to kind of sit and talk to her about this one-to-one, but I think there is a few little things about her that she would need to tweak to get down to those like 217s. But yeah, I'm sure her and Michael and her mum have all sat and looked at this and, looked at what Liz used to do in training, what the girls are doing now, her technique and everything. And I am excited to see what she does, and I'm just excited to see Eilish run 26 miles, because to her it's like, oh my god,
I was about to say
the days where 10-mile was like, a massive long run for her.
I was about to say she's not short of experience around her in her camp, and I spoke to Liz a few weeks ago actually, and one interesting thing that Liz said was that when she was training kind of in the 80s, and I think this was after she won the gold at Edinburgh in 86, is that she was being pushed to do kind of 25 miles in 5-mile splits. And she was getting to the point of very, very quick 5-mile paces back to back. And what was that point where she would actually potentially hit the wall? And she said, well, I never, ever really experienced that feeling of hitting the wall. So I guess kind of a bit of a segue here. have you experienced what's kind of commonly known as hitting the wall, and how does that feel if you have?
I don't think I have totally hit the wall, because to me, hitting the wall is like when you see, the guys that are staggering, barely able to kind of move. I've went off too fast and suffered from it in the end and slowed dramatically. But I don't think I've ever got to the point where I've thought I can't take another step. I'm totally empty, completely deplenished all my stores. So yeah, kind of, it is a weird phenomenon. I think now, because of the way where our marathons are set up, we're taking on board carbs and fluids and gels and everything every 5K. So there's really no reason why an elite athlete should hit the wall, because you should be replenishing as you're going along. So I do think kind of it's still common in the masses, because they're obviously not getting their personal drinks every 5K like we are. But for an elite athlete, it should be pretty much, something that's never seen, because yeah, we can all go off too fast and blow up, but hitting the wall is, I think, completely different. It's like a physiological thing where you've literally just got no energy stores left and your body's shutting down.
I guess kind of a follow up to that would be kind of, what's the mindset like for a marathon? Because I guess everyone has their own mindset, but is there kind of a core principle for the marathon? I saw a post when London was on a few months ago, where you said essentially take it in 8-mile sections. Take the first 8 miles, the second 8 miles, the third 8 miles, and then the last 2 miles at the end. Is that kind of the philosophy that you would kind of implement with just a general marathon overall?
Yeah, it's kind of the way I tell my athletes to break it down, because it becomes more manageable chunks. Most people will have run 8 miles numerous times in training, whereas, I'd pretty much bet that anybody hasn't ran 26 mile in training. So if they look at the 26 mile as a whole, it's scary and you can get scared of that distance. So what I tell people is to respect the distance, but don't fear it. And so that you're not fearing it, break it down into smaller chunks. So some people might break it down into 5Ks or 10Ks, but I like the 8 mile, because it's then kind of, you've got 3 defined sections where you can focus on different things, and then that last 2 miles you just run with whatever you've got left, unleash your heart, as I like to say. And yeah, it just makes it a lot more kind of smaller bite-sized chunks to get your head around, instead of thinking, oh my god, I've got to run 26 mile. You're like, right, get through this 8 mile, we've done that, tick that off, get through the next 8 mile. And it's just, yeah, like I said, just a lot more manageable. For myself on race day, yeah, last few I've looked at those 8 mile splits, but it's normally more kind of just get to your next feed station, so every 5K. And yeah, it's kind of, again, just smaller chunks.
Almost like a landmark, essentially. Yes. Then
yeah, definitely, yeah. And like if it was a championship where it's a lapped course or something, it's just like, get through this lap, and just counting down instead of counting kilometers where it's 42, or miles where it's 26. Just something that you can get your head around a little bit easier.
And I'm guessing that's the same with the 50-kilometer run as well, and you had that in Romania when you set that world record as well.
Yeah, that was laps, and I actually lost count of the laps. I thought I only had 1 left, and I didn't. I had 2. Thankfully, I didn't sprint finish. And for that one, it was a case of get to the 42-kilometer, because obviously I've never raced beyond that. So I wanted to get to that point feeling comfortable and strong, and then hopefully push on. I did have a little bit of a bad patch after that 42, but kind of I got round to the 45, and I got a second lease of life. It helped that the team manager shouted I was going to break the world record, and I knew I had a decent lead, and I was only 4 kilometers from home. So yeah, you could push on. But yeah, it was just a case of, I split it up again into 4.5, because the way the lap was, feed stations were at each end. So it was 4.5 kilometers between feed stations, and just focus on getting your next bottle. I knew what would be in each of my bottles. So it was kind of something to look forward to. Be like, oh, I've got an orange gel this time. And, and it's just little things to take your mind off it.
That's quite incredible, actually, that you think about the color of the drinks to an extent when you're actually in that moment, and that you actually take different, because I guess everything is repetitive, everything is the same, and in your mind you're trying to think, oh, actually, this is different, and then you think, oh, this bit of the race could be slightly different based on that thought interpretation that you've had previously, and it's kind of cool to hear that even the little things like that do actually pop into your head and kind of give you that impetus as well.
Yeah, especially something like that 50k, because like I say, it was 9k laps. We did a little lap first off, and then it was like 4 or 5 9k laps. So it was very repetitive, and it was literally up one side of a street, do a U-turn and come back down. So you were just seeing the same things over and over. And if you had a little bit of a bad patch on one lap, you're kind of dreading going through that stage again, just in case you had another bad patch. So yeah, just things like changing the flavour of your gels or the flavour of your drinks, it gives you something to look forward to, and it just kind of snapped you out of, anything that was coming into your head. You had something else to think about. It was a different stimulus. And yeah, it's all mind tricks just to take your thoughts process away from what's going on in your legs, especially when you're getting tired.
It's pretty. I didn't actually know that you'd never run beyond 40. Is it 42 kilometers? You said.
Yeah, I'd never raced beyond 42. I'd done training runs up to 29 and 30 mile, but I'd never raced beyond the marathon distance. It was my first time going beyond marathon.
Do you get to a point in that? Did you get to a point in that race where you thought, okay, we're kind of in this essentially grey zone, which could potentially turn into a red zone, or in your case, a green zone, because you've got the world records. But I guess it must be a pretty weird feeling for when you're actually going into the unknown of distances that you never raced in before. Do you think
definitely
about that much in the race, or is it just you're thinking in the moment, right, I've got another lap, and you're still on that mindset of kind of 5k each?
I was trying not to think too far ahead, just trying to stay in the zone and concentrating on the mile that I was in or the lap that I was on. And I was always very wary. I know it's I kept on saying to myself, it's only 8 kilometers more, it's less than 5 mile more than the marathon, but it's like when you get to 20 mile in the marathon, you can be feeling great, and then a minute later it's all gone to pot. So I was like, right, I don't want that last 8k to be like the last 10k of a marathon. So my big focus was to keep as comfortable as possible in that first 42 kilometers. And in order to do that, with it being a lapped course and the men were on the course at the same time as us, every time I was passing our men coming down the opposite way, I was actually cheering and supporting for them. So I was like, yeah, go on, Paul, you're looking great. And all of them after, they were like, how on earth could you speak so much? We could only kind of go, yeah, go on, sort of thing. They couldn't string full sentences. But that was my way of judging my effort. So I knew if I could keep on giving that support, I was running kind of in the correct effort zone. Whereas if I could only do one word answers or one word shouts, I was probably working a little bit too hard, and then I was going to risk that last kilometers, just 8 kilometers, kind of slowing down or blowing up. So yeah, it was just all a case of judging my effort.
Based on the ferocity of the cheers for others, you could judge kind of the mental and physical state that you were at that point.
Yes. And it's kind of, I say it to a lot of my athletes as well in training and in racing, it's the talk test. If you can talk, you're running at kind of, probably is only 80%, 85%. If you can't talk, you're probably putting a little bit too much effort in. And yeah, that's the level that I wanted to be at. So to be able to do that and still break the world record, it was quite an achievement. And people said, would you try and get it back again? And I know now I can't go sub 3, that would just be absolutely crazy for us to even try. But I do think if I'd had a little bit more experience on the distance, that I could have probably went a little bit faster that day, because I was pretty much running within myself.
Kind of 303, 304 kind of pace.
Yeah, at the time, I think I was probably in sub 230 marathon pace, and I ended up going through the marathon in about 236. So, I probably could have went 3 minutes faster if I'd really put my foot down and went for it.
Well, talking of the marathons and marathon pace, you've now completed all the major marathons. When people tell you that, now you've kind of had that reflection period. Obviously, it's a month after Chicago. Do you think, wow, this is probably one of the proudest achievements of my whole life?
Yeah, it is pretty special doing all 6, especially as an elite athlete, because we normally just stick to kind of, obviously the Brits will stick to London because it's trials and everything, so then you don't get the chance to do Boston. Boston's obviously notoriously kind of, it's a tricky course, so you don't run your best there, and a lot of people now are just focused on fast times, so they'll miss out things like New York because it's a slower course, it's a tough course. And yeah, kind of, it is quite rare for an elite athlete to run all 6. I've had the added, obviously, Worlds and Olympics are classed as majors, so I've got actually 8 stars. Unfortunately, they don't do a medal for the 8 stars, but there's only myself and Edna Kiplagat, as far as I know, that I've ever done all 8. So it is quite a special and unique achievement. And yeah, it would have been lovely to do them all in sub 2:45, but yeah, kind of Chicago just blew that one to pieces a little bit.
I was about to say, looking at your times, well, just out of the 6, Berlin 2:29:30, London 2:29:06, Chicago, that's the 2:50, Boston 2:35, Tokyo 2:43, New York 2:42. I guess it's very easy to say London's the favourite in terms of all the marathons, but have you got a specific favourite that's potentially not London? And I can include Daegu and Rio in that as well.
Yeah. Obviously Rio, it's the Olympics, you're never going to beat that. But yeah, kind of New York was the one where I fell in love with the event. So I did my debut in London in 2010, and yeah, I just pretty much hated it. It's like I went into it really excited to do a marathon, but I also went into it too cocky, and I wanted to run 2:37 that year. So I was like, oh, that's easy. I was doing like kind of low 33 minutes for 10Ks, and I'd done 73 for a half. And yeah, just got overly cocky and went off too fast. And by 10 mile, I was just like, yeah, this is actually quite hard, and spent the next 16 mile hating life. But I then went to New York in the November, and it was the complete opposite. I ran a PB, which, running PBs at New York is quite rare for the elites. I ran a negative split, the only negative split I've ever done. And I just absolutely loved it, the whole event, the crowds and everything. And that's where I really fell in love with the event. So yeah, New York's quite special for that. And then again, Boston, by the time I got to Boston in 2019, I was starting to not fall out of love with the sport, but kind of starting to feel a bit stale. And I wanted a new challenge and something to stimulate us. And yeah, I went up to Boston, and it just totally did the trick. You don't go to Boston to run fast. You can run fast on Boston if you get the correct conditions, a tailwind all the way down, and you run the race well. But the course is tough. You go there to conquer the course and to actually race. And I think I did quite well that year. I was over 40 by that point, and yeah, kind of, 2:35 is probably the equivalent of a 2:33 at a flat London or Berlin. So yeah, I fell in love and got a spark ignited again with the Boston. And then that's when I was like, right, let's try for the 50. It's the World's coming up this year, and it's just another challenge to kind of bring us away from marathon training. Was starting to get a bit monotonous, and you're comparing all your kind of sessions to last time and everything. So yeah, just give us a new impetus and a new kind of energy to get out there.
I was about to ask, did you have a specific kind of day, point, moment where you said, I want to become a 6-star marathon finisher? Or was it just on the basis of, I've done, let's say, 3, and I might as well try it at that point?
I'd always something that I looked into, but I was never particularly fussed about doing Tokyo Marathon. it's kind of, I don't know why, but it's normally kind of like the one that just goes under the radar, where I'd always wanted to do Boston. That was my bucket list marathon. And then I'd done Berlin, I'd done New York, I'd done London. So by the time I'd done them, I was like, well, I might as well have a go at the other two. And yeah, I managed to get into the Tokyo, and Tokyo was quite bizarre because obviously the masses had been cancelled because it was the start of the pandemic. So it was kind of not the usual Tokyo. And I think I have missed out on the Tokyo Marathon experience, really. But yeah, it is something that I've always looked at and thought I'd like to do all of them, just because they are all, the majors and quite iconic marathons. So yeah, it was never kind of, top of my list. I want to do all this because, like I say, Tokyo was normally like, well, yeah, it's a possibility, but it's not a major kind of focus.
Is it just because of distance? Because I know obviously, you got the Europeans and then you got the Americans, and then Tokyo is kind of the one which is...
Yeah, it's obviously quite far away. It's hard to get into for the elites. A lot of the masses, they'll say Boston's the hardest because you've got to have a time qualifier. To get on the elite start of Tokyo Marathon is quite hard as well, because obviously you've just got so many people, like athletes in Japan. They could literally fill it with a domestic field and still have a very good field out there. But yeah, it was kind of just, it's never really grabbed my attention as I really want to do Tokyo. I did it because it was part of the series, and other than that, I don't think I would have done it.
Well, talking of, we have to chat about this at some point. Shalane Flanagan talking about, well, ironically not talking about Tokyo because she didn't actually do Tokyo because obviously it wasn't on this year, and did the virtual one in Portland in Oregon on a training course instead. But what do you make of Shalane's achievements? They are pretty staggering, and if you look at the times, I mean, they're all in that kind of 30, 40, 50 bracket as well, and it's consistency as well, not just the fact that she's done it. There's no 350 in there. There's no, it is professional. It is done in a way, I think, which it's very Shalane in that sense.
Yeah, it's phenomenal. I mean, at Chicago, she came past me at 22 mile, and I had slowed a lot by that point, but she literally made me look like I was standing still. She just floats on by. She took 4 minutes out of his over 4 mile. But no, it is, when I saw that she was doing that as a challenge, and at the time the actual Tokyo one was in, the biggest thing was the travel that I looked at. But, she took it all in her stride. She set that target of sub 3 hours for them all. And I think we pretty much knew that, she wasn't just going to jog around them in 2:55, 2:59s. And, she wasn't flat out, obviously, but she's now, 2 years retired. She's over 40. She's got 2 newly reconstructed knees. I think it must only be about 18 months since she had that done.
Yeah.
She's got a small child. So there's all sorts in there that takes her completely away from when she was winning New York and running kind of 2:22s, 2:23s. And yeah, just what she's done over that 6-week period. I did mine over 10 years and she still beats my average.
It's pretty incredible. You mentioned just the reconstructed knees, but I think for most people looking on, they would have looked at the schedule, and apart from the travel, they would have thought, oh, Boston, Chicago, back to back. That's tricky. So the fact that she, did both of them with, she said it was brutal. I think it was one of them which she said was brutal, but to still do those times with back-to-back marathons and then do New York after that as well is a pretty incredible achievement.
Yeah, like Chicago was our slowest, but conditions in Chicago were tough. It was hot and it was high humidity. So, you look at the Chicago times across the board and everybody was lower than what they were expecting that day. I think she was really lucky that it was Chicago than Boston. If it had been the other way around, I know how much Boston takes it out of your legs, especially your quads with all that downhill. I think then she might have struggled. But going from Chicago into Boston, it's not, it's hard because it's 2 marathons within 24 hours, but it's not as hard as if it was flipped around. She was then lucky that she could just go home, relax for a week. I'm sure she probably didn't relax for a week, but yeah, she can focus on her recovery for a week before then going and doing that Tokyo virtual. Whereas if it had been in Tokyo, she would have been, flying across God knows how many time zones, and just all the travel and the jet lag would have been really horrific, having done 2 marathons in 24 hours a few days beforehand as well.
Yeah, I think the fact that she was able to do the Tokyo one in Portland did really help the cause definitely. A lot. What do you think that Shalane's achievements? Because obviously she's pretty going to go down as the only person in history who's ever going to do this. Because Boston and Tokyo moving back to spring, and then London's the same in 2023. What will people look at this? Well, what do you think people will think when they look at Shalane's achievements? Because I'm guessing it will encourage a lot more people to potentially become 6-star marathon finishers in the future, because they will say that obviously Tokyo was virtual, but the fact that she did that within 42 days, people will potentially retire and go, actually, it's worth a shot.
Yeah, it opens up challenges for kind of, retired athletes or athletes that are coming to the end of the careers and wanting something kind of different to do. I do think it's gone under the radar quite a bit with a large proportion of the running field as well, because you've got the masses who are like, oh my God, this is amazing, just because of the kind of physical times that she's run as well. They can't get their heads around running 1 marathon in that time, never mind 6 in 6 weeks. But then there's some kind of like that have just kind of swept it under the carpet as well. She's a 2:22 runner at best, and she's running like 2:30 yards and 2:40s. What's the big deal? We used to do that all the time in training and whatever. So I think from my point of view, I think what she's done is phenomenal. And kind of like I say, I've done them over 10 years and still haven't run as fast average as her. But I do think it opens up kind of the scope for other athletes to take on similar challenges and everything. And it's great that she's went back and done something like that, because it would have been quite easy for her just to go, I've had my time and my day, I'm over. But she's kind of brought it back into the limelight a bit. There was a massive big billboard, and I think it was Times Square, with her on there. And it's not very often that athletics get stuff like that.
I was about to say, what do you think of, it's a very generalized question, but the state and the health of, kind of finishing off, the state and the health of athletics in general? Because if you look at kind of especially athletics kind of within the sprinting, the women's sprinting especially this year, in terms of the personalities, you have somebody like Elaine Thompson, Shelly-Ann Fraser-Price, but Sha'Carri Richardson has created, a new limelight. She's been in billboards of her own in America. Then you've got the likes of Neeraj Chopra, who's, he's got 5 million Instagram followers now after winning the javelin gold in India. But obviously then, you mentioned the shoe debate earlier on, and, there are doping cases, of course, kind of littered around the world right now. What do you think of the state of the sports in 2021?
I think kind of, we have got, it's obviously moved on a lot. You've got kind of people that saying they're switched off because you can't compare times because of the shoes and everything, especially in the endurance side of things. You've got people that have switched off because of the doping. But I think kind of, catching these big names in the anti-doping world, it's not great for the image of the sport, but on the same time, it is good for the image of the sport, because it's saying like, we're not standing for this crap. If somebody's doping and we catch them, they're getting kicked out. We're not just going to brush it under and, just kind of turn a blind eye sort of thing. And obviously we did go through a big kind of black period with all the Russian stuff and all that kind of stuff, where really the sport was dragged through the mud and, tarnished. From some people, that's never going to recover. But I think we are starting to come round, and we have got some characters in the sport. I don't think we need, kind of massive circus characters, and we just let the performances do the talking. But at the same time, we do also need some people that are going to go out there and grab the attention of just kind of the everyday armchair sports fan, so that they're not, just going, oh, it's track and field, just flick over. It's somebody that they want to watch and they want to hear on an interview, and do kind of the press stuff and everything. So yeah, I think we're building back up from those kind of dark days. What was it now, about 4 years ago or something, 4 or 5 years ago?
Yeah.
But I do think we have quite a bit of work to do, and we're always going to have something that comes along that kicks us back a step or two. At the minute, it's probably the shoes in the endurance world, but you've just got to accept that, that they're here now. There's nothing that we can do about it. Yeah, times are changing, but see it as a progress. Otherwise, we'd all be still running on cinder track in leather spikes and, struggling to break a 4-minute mile.
Yeah, I was about to say that's a whole other debate for, I think, another time on the shoes. But I guess final point for me, what do you think, athletics and just running in general needs to do to attract kind of more fans, and also fans who haven't been around? Because you look at the marathons, and if you see the streets of New York, it was amazing. So many thousands of people lined up in the streets, and it's great to have masses back. Do you reckon that they would necessarily, the people kind of watching or taking part in a marathon, then watch a track and field, a Diamond League meet per se? Or do you think that the marathon and the endurance running side is almost separate to the track and field side overall? And if so, how would that integration work?
Yeah, I'm not sure how we kind of marry the two together, but I do think there's like two schools of, I think you've got your athletics, so your track and field, they know that it's the Worlds and the Europeans and everything coming up next year. And then you've got your park runners and your mass marathons and your Great North runs. And, they're kind of more just your casual runner. And the probably couldn't name you anybody on the track and field team or tell you where the World Championships are next year. But there'll be regular runners and they'll do their local 10Ks and that sort of thing. We've got to somehow marry those together. So obviously you'd think the big focus would be a 5,000, because then the park runners can kind of, connect to that. But then when you've got a guy running, sub 13 for 5,000 on the track, your 30-minute park runner is still not really going to be able to grasp that, because it's alien to them. They're like, how can somebody run this, more than twice my speed? So I think there is a lot to work to kind of join up those two groups, because it is almost two different sports just now, mass participation and track and field athletics.